Hello, everyone. My name is Ashish Haruray. I'm with AXA XL at Enterprise Data Solutions within the Office of Chief Data Officer. I've been here since January 2018, help us build data governance and data protection framework. My background is in data governance, compliance, and regulatory. I also have experience in data architecture. The industries that I had opportunity to work with are insurance, financial services, healthcare and life sciences, and telecommunication. I happen to be a Collibra 5-star ranger, but I consider myself a data enthusiast. Um, Again, I would like to take a moment to thank you for your time today. I know that we are all going through unprecedented times, and this crisis has given us a lot to think about. My hope is that we come out of this stronger. Um, so let me give you a quick summary of what we are going to be covering today. The session today is about data governance, data protection, and data sharing. And these concepts seem to be conflicting for many people, but I'd like to share how these are actually complementary and how having data governance capabilities within your organization helps you build a strong data protection framework. As we move along in the session, I'll go over that aspect. Are you ready? If you work in data governance and or data privacy, chances are that these two topics are very interconnected for you. And for everyone who works in this space realizes that they are often so interconnected that it's hard to separate them. Today, I'll be talking about protecting and sharing data or democratizing data. How governance actually reconciles these two competing concepts. The environment we live in today is increasingly getting more regulated, and the expectation is also for us to be providing our data to be transparent, data to be intelligent, and at the same time protecting the data. It seems like these are competing and increasingly important requirements from all of us across the globe and across industries. I hope you'll find today's session useful. Beginning, I would like to talk about the data transparency, as I mentioned, or democratizing data. So let's first talk about data transparency or data intelligence. First expectation from most organizations is that data needs to be made available for the right purpose to the right audience. Data needs to be searchable, it needs to be understood without ambiguity, and it needs to be trustworthy. And transparency and trustworthiness go hand in hand. If you make your data searchable and it makes it easy for users to search and find data, I think you won the battle, half the battle already. Let's look at the data transparency concepts, the components that build data transparency. In my mind, each component of data transparency or each metadata really helps you build a story that can so easily be told without using so many words or communicating back and forth with different groups. It allows you to connect the dots, and it strongly supports your organization's self-serve model and avoids or minimizes the need for middlemen. When we are talking about data transparency components, we're talking about starting with glossary, where you have business terms, how those business terms connect with other metadata. So lineage, for example, where the data comes from, where does the data go, which reports it's used in, how does the data compare in terms of the data quality, whether the data is validated against different data quality dimensions, whether the data has reference data components built into that, and what are the security and compliance aspects related to the data. What data policies maybe affect or governing this element. All of those pieces, in my mind, help us create a story that can be told with data governance capabilities or your data governance center. With data transparency, you are making your data understood better, searchable, understood, and behind the scenes, the story that the data tells that is something that your organization can benefit from. Now let's look at data protection framework. So data protection and data transparency are, as I mentioned before, are not competing concepts, but what we are looking at is what are the critical components of data protection framework. So in most cases, as we saw, the data protection can be built upon a strong data governance foundation, looking at the data protection framework, what components or what factors play a role. So I've listed a five point items here. Let's start with what. What are the regulatory requirements that your organization must comply with? Well, that's a really important question to answer, and it depends on the geography. It depends on the industry. So, for example, if you are in Europe, you are subject to GDPR. If you're in US, you have CCPA, and so on and so forth. Different geographies bring in different challenges. And same thing with the industry. So, if you're in finance, you have BCBS, you have Solvency II, and other regulations. And if you happen to be in health care or life sciences, you have HIPAA laws that your organization needs to comply with. So that's about what regulatory requirements your organization is going to comply with. The next question is why? Why is it important to comply with those regulatory requirements? And more importantly, what are the consequences for non-compliance? And we can all relate to financial consequences because that's probably where it hurts most. And as you know, that in most cases where GDPR has been fairly new in Europe, but the significance of the fines on large companies such as Google have been making headlines, and it's important to know what are the costs that you're going to pay for from financial purposes, also from a reputational damages that this may cause, and it can translate into monetary losses, but also reputational losses can amount to lost business. So understanding why it's important. The next factor is how does your organization comply with those requirements? So right, you have the if you can show and not tell how your organization is complying with those requirements, then your story is all the more credible because you are not just you're not just telling how your organization is complying, but you're actually doing, you're evidencing how your organization is working towards getting those compliance requirements. Um, the next factor is where does your data live in your organization's landscape? I know that's a loaded question, and I know that's a very difficult question to answer, but that's exactly what the regulators are asking today. Do you know where your data lives? And if you don't have a data landscape, that question becomes very difficult to answer, and especially today when the data is proliferated across different applications, across different systems, it's even more important to stay on top of the data landscape. And so knowing where your data lives is super critical. And then the final point here is who has access to data in your organization. Absolutely critical to answer that question, essential to answer this question to ensure that you are protecting your data by showing that you control the access to critical data and that you're collecting data for the intended business purpose. This is who has access to what data has become a very important question to answer for regulators. Um, Finally, if you follow data by design principles, which basically tell you to think about data from the beginning, from the get-go, you're thinking about data, and this is not an afterthought. So having that data by design principle in mind, you are starting to build something that can last for long. Having a data governance capability or having data governance center that Collibra provides, how does that help you jumpstart your data protection framework? So let's talk about that. When we talk about automating the information, keeping all the information in one place, you are actually making your regulators think about your process to be even more controlled and more documented because you are showing all the information in one place. You can also do this manually or in different systems, but that becomes very difficult to sustain, and it becomes also very difficult to prove that you are keeping all of that information together and consistent. Um, by providing evidence-based support to your first, second, and third lines of defense, you can show and not just tell. and that brings credibility to your data protection environment. And again, let's look at what can you do if you have data governance platform that's built. How does that help you with the foundation for data protection framework? At AXA XL, we built our data governance center and started with business glossary. That's where most organizations start. Having business glossary for data governance center, you have a right place, central place where you can actually document all the business terms, and you can classify them. So from data privacy perspective and also from security risk classification perspective, that's the perfect place to put that information. And that's where you can actually help build your DPIA or data for data privacy impact assessment, which tells you what projects have what private data that needs to be managed. So you have data glossary, that's your starting point. And then you can govern with your workflows. You can ensure that your onboarding of data assets is controlled and governed, and you go through the approval process to make that process work, which also shows that you have a structure around the processes. By governing the policies, so for example, data retention policies are important factors. You can actually ensure that your organization can show how you are controlling the process, how you are on top of the processes. You can have a repository for business processes that are needed for records of processing activities. You can document the information you are collecting for each business process, who owns those business process, what data are you collecting for that, and what is the legal basis or business purpose for collecting that information, how long you plan to retain that data, what type of data you're collecting for that. Having all of that repository in your data governance framework can help you build your data protection framework even more robust, because now you have all of those business processes linked with your metadata all in one place. You can also show how you are assigning the roles and responsibilities for data assets, which are critical component. So you can actually show who's subject matter expert, who should people go to get if they have any questions on. You can also build processes around records of processing activities, data privacy impact assessment. You can also show how your organization is working on data minimization, which is also required by regulators to show that you're collecting data for the business purpose that it's intended for, and that you're masking the data or you're obfuscating data or deleting data after that its intended business purpose is served. So showing that information in one place is essential for you to build your data protection framework. And finally, talking about the access control. So if you can actually bring in your AD group information into data governance, and then you can tie in who has access to what data, now you're telling a more complete story, and you can actually show that you have data access controls that you can build around that process. So in summary, having data governance framework has helped us extend that to data protection framework at AXA XL, and building that platform has given us a world-class, robust platform for data governance and data protection. So that's all I had for the session today. I hope you find this session useful. Thank you for your time and have a nice day.